for having me here today. I appreciate this. I wanted to kind of start by thinking, why should we even teach our children a foreign language? I mean, why does it matter? English is everywhere. There are so many time and budgetary constraints on our schools. Why should we bother teaching it? I mean, isn't it just a sort of interesting, albeit at the end of the day, an expendable elective? Now, as an anthropologist, you can probably guess what I think, but let's consider what Nelson Mandela had to say. He had said, if you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. But if you talk to it in a language, his own language, that goes to his heart. I think that we can all agree that learning a second language vastly improves our multicultural understanding and our communication skills. That's what the Global Corner is all about, and that's why we're here today. However, to convince the community at large, research findings might be more compelling. Compared to those who are not, children who are learning a second language are achieving significant academic gains. Higher standardized test scores, they're building greater self-esteem, they're developing much richer understandings of the multicultural worlds in which they live, and as adults, they're experiencing greater economic success and more opportunities in the workforce. Lee asked me to talk to you today about the importance of teaching foreign language to children and about what the Global Corner is doing about it. I think a lot of you are already really familiar with what they're doing in terms of teaching the kids about ethnic diversity, but not many of you may understand or know about what they're doing in terms of teaching kids foreign languages in elementary schools. I want to start by looking at the research, and I kind of broke it down into two broad domains for our purposes here today. And the first is improved overall school performance. Research has consistently shown that students who learn a foreign language tend to outscore their non-foreign language peers on both verbal and even math sections of standardized exams. This is especially true when their language training begins in elementary schools. For example, one study found that these gains were present even among third graders who received just 3 30-minute Spanish language instructions or lessons each week. And when they compared them to a control group of children who did not receive those Spanish language lessons, the ones who were studying Spanish tended to go into their metropolitan achievement test scores were much higher than those who were not, even just after one semester of study. And this was in math and in language. This continues in high school too. The College Entrance Examination Board has consistently found that students who average 4 or more years of foreign language study have higher verbal SAT scores. Consider also immersion programs. And I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with these, but in different parts of the country, the public schools, their elementary schools are called immersion programs. And it's where they teach kids in grades 1 through 3 the basics, like grammar and math, in a language other than English. It tends to be Mandarin, French, or Spanish. And they've been studying these kids. In one study, had reviewed and been tracking over 5,000 immersion students' test scores in reading, writing, and math. By the end of the 3rd grade, their scores are about the same as other kids in the regular tracked programs in 3rd grade, but by the end of the 6th grade, their scores in those 3 areas were surpassing those of the non-immersion students. The second domain involves improved cognitive functioning and enhanced analytic skills. Investigators have found that children who learn a foreign language in elementary school tend to have cognitive advantages over children who do not have that early foreign language training, and they tend to score higher on problem solving and creativity tests. They're able to think in really innovative ways. One study had reviewed over 30 years of research investigating children who were learning foreign languages in elementary schools, and they found that they had this mental flexibility that was far superior to kids who were not in a bilingual program. For example, they were able to contend with multiple stimuli much better than kids who were in single language programs. When they were being bombarded with lots of information like we're giving our kids right now, the kids who were in the multi-language programs were able to really filter out what was important and what was not. And what they found is that it all had to do with teaching these kids how to listen really closely to differences in languages. And they end up doing the opposite of what is commonly assumed about children who learn a second language, that they would be language delayed. Research comparing monolingual and bilingual children also found big differences in how children processed knowledge. For example, if they gave 5- and 6-year-olds language problems to solve, they both pretty much knew the same amount of language. However, there was one question where there was a big difference. If they asked the kids an illogical sentence that was still grammatically correct, for example, apples grow on noses, The monolingual children kind of got stuck. They said, well, that's silly, and then their thinking just stalled. But the bilingual children were able to go and recognize it's silly, but it's still grammatically correct. What they found was that they were really understanding what a noun was, what a verb was, proper sentence construction, and the idea that you can represent meaning in more than one way. And these are elementary kids. There's a British author and journalist who I really like what he had to say. His name is Geoffrey Willens, and he pointed out that you can never understand one language until you understand at least two. Investigators are starting to think that improved cognitive functioning and analytic skills learned through early foreign language training might be a factor why European and Asian students are outscoring our kids in standardized exams. A major differentiating group or variable between these two groups is that American kids typically receive little, if any, foreign language instruction in elementary school. However, in Europe, I don't mean Britain, but Europe and Asia, those kids are receiving foreign language instruction early on in at least two languages. And this is not just about being proficient in another language. We're thinking this has more to do with kind of the mental wiring that's being formed in these young children at this age. Their cognitive abilities, their thinking skills, their analytic skills, their listening skills, and all of which feeds into academic success. Antoine Lavoisier, and he's actually the father of modern chemistry, he kind of said what I'm trying to say better than I can. We think only through the medium of words. Languages are true analytical methods. Algebra is at the same time a language and an analytical method. The art of reasoning is nothing more than a language well arranged. He deeply understood the profound relationship between language and scientific reasoning. They're inextricable, and foreign language study reinforces this relationship. And this kind of gets at why you're thinking that children who are in these bilingual programs are actually doing well in math and language. Yet despite all of these advantages, in this country we're falling behind and suffering the consequences. As I mentioned, our kids are being outperformed by Asian and European kids in standardized exams. It's affecting us economically. Research reviews frequently cite this one statistic, that an estimated 30% of large corporations in this country believe that they lost international business due to personnel lacking international skills and foreign language capabilities. And apparently it's a matter of national security as well. Former CIA head Liam Panetta has become one of this country's most unlikely yet biggest advocates of teaching kids foreign languages in elementary schools. And he and many others cite that we have volumes and volumes of high security information that we collected that relate to protecting the United States, but we don't have that many people available to even understand all of this data because we're such a monolingual country. Our geographic isolation and the pervasiveness of English are frequently cited as our justifications for not teaching kids foreign languages in elementary schools, and I feel like this argument just isn't plausible anymore. A former director of the U.S. Census Bureau has pointed out that we are on our way to becoming the first country in the world that is literally made up of every part of this world. Yet, we may be the only nation in the world where it's possible to graduate from high school or even college with little, if any, foreign language instruction. There's this great story from Uruguay that really captures the essence of what I'm trying to say. There's a story about a skinny cat that was waiting outside a mouse hole, and the mouse wasn't coming out, and the cat was getting so frustrated. Then this fat cat came along, and it said, I can help. And with the skinny cat out of the way, the fat cat sat outside the mouse hole and started to bark. And the mouse thought, oh, the dog chased away the cat, it's safe to come out. And so it comes out, and of course the fat cat ate the mouse. And then the fat cat said, you see, it pays to be bilingual. So we have to level the playing field. We have to offer our children better opportunities to excel both academically and financially, and then in turn strengthen our economy and our national security. And of course, this is all a lot harder said than done. Schools are faced with enormous budgetary restrictions and time constraints with poor curriculum requirements. It's really difficult for them to find the time and money to weave this foreign language education into their elementary programs. Their days are already jam-packed, and also it's very difficult to find native speakers who are licensed to teach in elementary schools because we're, again, such a monolingual country. It's daunting. But I think the Global Quarter has come up with this really good idea, language labs. With funding, it intends to install Rosetta Stone language training programs onto computers and then give them to elementary schools so that they can use them in after-school programs. Initially, the idea is to pilot these language labs in a select group of elementary schools, And then in time, the long-term goal is to reach more broadly into the community and offer language labs through libraries, churches, community centers, any place where children and their families can come and learn a foreign language. And I really love this idea because I feel like it provides a really good alternative to schools who are dealing with these time and budgetary constraints. And it also gives them a way to supplement their curriculum and offer students a chance to learn a foreign language. And it all fits into the Global Corner's broader understanding and undertaking to make our kids more culturally literate and to catch them up with the rest of the world, where multilingualism has been recognized as academically and economically necessary and normal. Pensacola may not be the most ethnically diverse city in this country, especially when you compare it to LA and New York, but it's still part of a country that is ethnically diverse, and we need to support our children to become global citizens who are representative of this ethnically diverse United States. It's my hope, as I'm sure that it is yours, that the Global Corner will become a cultural institution that is as central to Pensacola as its opera, its art museum, its baseball stadium, and all the while building upon this working partnership that already exists with its schools and is hugely popular among students and their teachers. I was just sharing with these guys that the other day at my son's elementary school graduation, part of their ceremony is to go and ask the kids, what was your favorite part about your experience in elementary school? And so many of them cited the Global Corner. I felt kind of badly. They didn't say, oh, my experience at my elementary school. Instead, they cited the Global Corner that was brought to their elementary schools. It had a huge impact on their lives. In closing, indulge me, and let's consider what an anthropologist who's actually famous has to say, Margaret Mead. The world doesn't seem to understand what a small group of people can do in changing things from what they are to what they ought to be. As a matter of fact, if you really study history, it's always been a small group of people that have ended up changing the world. Thank you.